Hey everyone, welcome to my channel's first episode of CTRL+T, also known as CTRL+Talk. In these videos, I'll be taking a look at a variety of different topics, from 2000s media nostalgia to anime and video games. These are a more relaxed style of video, and even though the topics will be lightly researched, I want to use it as an opportunity to just talk to you guys about things I'm interested in. Along the way, we'll be working on some art together as well. Today, we're going to be talking about Vocaloid 6 and its character design. For anyone unaware, Vocaloid 6 has been receiving some mixed reviews from the community, mainly around the technology side of things. Compared to cheaper options like Synthesizer V, Vocaloid's new technology left a lot to be desired, and many have said that compared to older versions of the engine, there really hasn't been much improvement. But the issue I have with Vocaloid 6 is more so with Yamaha's design choices. Not all of them are bad, I'll say that now. Many of the Vocaloid 6 voice banks are not made by Yamaha, and they follow the same format of Vocaloids who have gone before them. The Vocaloids I'm referring to are the free update Vocaloids, like Sakura, Sarah, Akito, etc. But before I get into why these designs aren't as successful as ones that came before them, especially from a marketing standpoint, we do need to go back to the beginning of Vocaloid, and how the marketing of Vocaloid has changed over time. This video is going to go into a bit of marketing theory, a bit of character design theory, and all of that fun jazz stuff, but it won't be too wordy, I promise. So sit down, open up a project you've been working on, or open up that game you wanted to play, and allow me to tell you about the very interesting topic of visual marketing in Vocaloid. Like I said, we need to go back to the beginning, back to when Vocaloid 1 released. Leon and Lola were the first ever Vocaloids released for the Vocaloid engine. At the time, Vocaloid was being promoted to a more professional audience, primarily music producers already within the professional music industry. Therefore, the branding reflected this by avoiding use of cartoony mascots, cute characters, etc. Instead, they used stock imagery of some lips. I guess it was to suggest the level of anonymity, and that these vocal synthesizers could blend in with the vocals of real people. I think that was the initial goal, after all, to replicate and synthesize the human voice. However, the marketing wasn't the most successful. Music industry professionals weren't interested in the concept of vocal synths at the time. They just kind of didn't want it, they didn't see a need for it. So with their target demographic not interested in the product they've made for them, the minds behind Vocaloid were a little bit stuck. Not to mention the designs for Leon and Lola were a little bit odd. They weren't bad, people just felt like there was a lot left to be desired. There wasn't too much going on with the packaging, and the packaging didn't really tell us about the Vocaloids themselves. Luckily, around the same time as Leon and Lola's release, at-home music production was becoming popular in a big way, mainly because you no longer needed a second mortgage to rent out a studio, buy instruments and recording hardware, all that really expensive stuff that nobody really wants to buy. By 2004, 50% of Japanese households had computers, and 60% of people in the US had computers in their home as well. So Vocaloid and other music software was becoming more accessible than ever. Come to think of it, the explosion of Vocaloid actually coincides quite nicely with the boom of independent music being created on things like MySpace. Same idea, different output. It is pretty cool when you think about it though, actually. In Vocaloid, using mascot characters as marketing officially began with Meiko and Kaito, two of the other Vocaloids released for Vocaloid 1. However, mascots wouldn't help Vocaloid truly take off until about August 2007 when Hatsune Miku was released. Hatsune Miku was released on the Vocaloid 2 engine as well, so it took all that time to actually develop a character that would actually fully take off. Hatsune Miku blew up in a way that I don't think anyone actually really expected. For some context, Hatsune Miku outsold Meiko and Kaito's lifetime sales at that point in just a week. Or a couple of weeks, I can't remember off the top of my head, but somewhere around that point. Hatsune Miku's demos and design were revealed a few days before her actual release, so it is very, very likely that there was fan art and fan works made of Hatsune Miku before she'd even released. And it hasn't stopped since 2007. It feels like every year, or even like every few months, there's a new art trend or version of Hatsune Miku that makes the rounds online. Pokemon Mikus, the Mikus of the world, etc. Hatsune Miku's name roughly translates the first sound of the future, and her design needed to reflect that. I don't think they were intending on her looking like she was from the 3000s or some very, very distant future, but more so a near future that's just out of reach. The chrome, angular clothing, unnatural hair colours, all reminiscent of futuristic fashion at the time, but on a more subdued and simplified level to make her seem more down to earth. I think the main part of Miku's appeal is that she's a little bit like Spider-Man. Her design is simple, easy to read, and extremely iconic, but she can also look vastly different depending on the song, setting, or context. She could be a nurse, she could be a princess, she could be a Sonic mascot, a magical girl, she could be a Fujoshi, pretty much anything. And she is truly a blank slate. Krypton gave us enough to get us interested, but let us fill in the rest of the gaps ourselves. And that's why Hatsune Miku and many of the other Vocaloids that came after her flourished compared to older Vocaloids. Of course, not every Vocaloid got the same level of success as Hatsune Miku, Rin and Len, Gumi, Luca, etc. But they developed equally as passionate producers and fan bases around them as well. People loved the designs of these early Vocaloids so much that people started making fanloids and later Utao voice banks. My Utao video is still coming. I'm working on it slowly. It will come someday, I promise. I think this speaks to how popular the Vocaloid format was, and many Vocaloids that came after would try to replicate the thunder that was Hatsune Miku's release and design. Vocaloid 2, while still having some voice banks that use stock images and human models, had a lot more mascot designs. It's like the main teams behind the Vocaloid voice banks realised who the target audience was for the software. Some were still aimed towards a more professional audience, such as Prima and Tonyo, who were both made to have an opera-style voice. Some characters even had their appearance changed based on the location. Sweet Anne, for example, in Taiwan, is a pretty anime girl with flowing blonde hair and a white dress. But everywhere else, she looks quite different. Almost all the Vocaloids that were based on the English language still used human models, humanoid illustration, or stock imagery. They were very much aware that anime still wasn't quite as popular in the West as it was in Japan. So an English-speaking Vocaloid with an anime design might not have landed as well as they'd hoped. Looking back, I do think they actually made the right choice for the time, especially since English-speaking voice banks were still being promoted to the more professional industry in the West. During Vocaloid 3, however, none of the publicly available voice banks were marketed using human photographs or stock designs. Every commercial Vocaloid during Vocaloid 3 had a mascot character tied to it, even the English-speaking voice banks. But of course, not all the characters were human. VY 1 and 2 were both based on sword designs for some reason. I still think they're really cool, but I don't know why they did it. Some of my favourite designs from the Vocaloid 3 era though include Maknae Nana, Rana, and I need to pause this to figure out how to pronounce. Chanyan Laura, I think that is. I'm really sorry, my Chinese isn't. I don't know any Chinese or have any Chinese pronunciation, so please do forgive me. She was sadly a cancelled project, so she never did see the light of day, which makes me really sad. However, she does have files within both Vocaloid 5 and Vocaloid 6. It's unknown as to why this is, as it makes her one of the few private Vocaloids to have their own directory in Vocaloid 5 and 6. Maybe this means she might become an official voice bank in the future? I don't know. I can't confirm anything. I'm not behind the scenes. Vocaloid 3 and 4 are very much considered to be the Vocaloid golden era, both in terms of technological development and visual design. The designs of the Vocaloids played a massive role in their popularity, as they helped to promote creativity and innovation among the budding fanbase. When I did my thesis for university, I studied purchasing behaviour, advertising, and its impact on pretend play amongst young girls playing with dolls. When I studied brats in particular, I briefly looked at celebrity culture, and I think some of the theories and explanations as to why we follow celebrities so closely can actually match up with Vocaloids quite well too. Ellis Cashmore, in her book Celebrity/Culture, stated that consumers aren't drawn to celebrities by what they do, but who they are. And that celebrities are not people, they are what we imagine people to be like. It is quite an extreme claim, but when I studied this, I inferred this as us as consumers not knowing the real person and only knowing the celebrity. We only perceive the celebrity as a concept that communicates ideas, values, and promotes a product that we believe in. And I think the same concept can be applied to character mascots in Vocaloid, but in a more literal sense. The Vocaloids literally are not people, but part of their appeal is that we can place our own ideas and perceptions onto them that we believe in. It's hard to create a concept of a person without seeing their face, which is where I think the Vocaloid stock characters fall short. Some people argue that the downfall of some of Vocaloid's design actually started with Cyber Diva and Cyber Songman in Vocaloid 4. However, I actually kind of disagree with this for a few reasons. Just because the style went from anime to human photography again, doesn't mean the voice banks lost their touch. The illustrated mascot characters still massively outweighed the photograph models in Vocaloid 4, and the illustrated characters were still far more popular. Furthermore, even though Cyber Diva and Cyber Songman's designs are in a different format, the atmosphere and the feel of these designs still matches the quote-unquote Vocaloid style that we've come to know. Futuristic designs featuring headphones, visors, and unique designs. they still belonged in the wider theming. Vocaloid 4 also still had some really banger illustration designs, including Nakamura Iroha V4, Otomachi Una, and V4 Flower. I think Vocaloid 5 is when it starts getting dicey. Vocaloid 5 didn't really get the time to grow and develop like 2, 3, or 4 did. The only era of Vocaloid with less voice banks than Vocaloid 5 is Vocaloid 1. If we say Amy, Chris, Kaori, and Ken are part of one pack, and then the same with Meika, Hime, and Mikoto, Vocaloid 5 only had 4 more releases than Vocaloid 1. We started seeing a massive shift in the style of Vocaloids, especially in the stock Vocaloids created by Yamaha. Amy, Chris, Kaori, and Ken were interesting. They were still mascot characters, but heavily simplified into a low poly 3D style. They're also extremely simple, lacking any defining character traits or features for people to latch onto. They were just normal people, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think they were just quite unexpected, especially since the companies behind these voice banks had been on a roll visually up to this point. It seems like they took 1 step forward but 2 steps back. More diversity within the style of mascots for Vocaloid, not just in art style but also in appearance, more skin tones, hair types, etc., is a net good, and it'll always will be. It's just a shame that we didn't get to see these benefits shine with a striking original mascot design to accompany these voice banks. I think this actually marks the beginning of some of Vocaloid's design issues as a whole. Like I said at the start, this video is only really focusing on some of the stock Vocaloid designs specifically made by Yamaha. A lack of detail, refinement, and identity most of all. The Vocaloid stock voice banks just sort of stand there looking at the viewer. They're expressionless. Nothing about what they are doing tells us about who they are or who they could be. Vocaloid 6 marked the release of many voice banks published by Yamaha. They were responsible for many of the debut Vocaloids for the Vocaloid 6 engine, and additional future voice banks under the same series. Only 2 of the voice bank sets published by Yamaha maintain the character mascot theming of previous Vocaloid voice banks. Po Uta, the voice bank made based on Porter Robinson, and a set of voice banks I'll get into in a minute because they're actually a little bit different. The other voice banks solely created and published by Yamaha are designed to be simple silhouettes on colourful backgrounds, giving the vague suggestion of a design. The characters presented take on the appearances of regular, everyday people. There's no unrealistic hair colours or crazy outfits, at least from what we can see, or what we can assume. The characters are actually entirely in the silhouette. We don't get to see anything about them. No face, no nothing. Compared to those who came before, these design reveals were very, very underwhelming. Faces are extremely important to marketing a product or idea. Seeing a humanoid face in an ad or marketing campaign helps create a sense of identity for what is being sold. It's easier for the product to create a human connection with the viewer when the face is visible. It also helps to improve the memorability of the product being sold long term. I do get what I think Yamaha was trying to do with this. They likely didn't want the voice banks to be tied down by one specific concept or idea. But I think they went too far in the other direction, making a product that is unrecognisable and difficult to remember. If someone showed you one of the designs, would you be able to pick who was who? Sakura maybe, since her background colour is quite on the nose, but the rest? This isn't a jab at the artist either. I think the art itself is actually really, really cute. It's more so the design direction that Yamaha decided to go in for this, and that's where it falls short for me. The other voice bank set that I mentioned earlier goes against a lot of what I just talked about though, Zola Project. Zola Project is a project expanding on a set of 3 Vocaloids made during the Vocaloid 3 era, updated with new singing voice banks and talking voice banks for Vocaloid 6. The goal for Zola Project is to create a group of Vocaloids that were made to work together. It's like they've been developed to be a boy group that could be used both together and apart. And the designs really fit the vibe of a boy group. Maybe it's because they brought on the illustrator for A3 for the project. I think Zola Project is actually a really positive direction in terms of modern Vocaloid. Zola Project has received some really positive feedback from the community, especially fans of the original Zola Project from Vocaloid 3. The new Zola Vocaloids have 2D MVs, 3D models, and a lot of backing from Yamaha in general. I think it'd be really fun to see some fan designs based on the silhouettes, sort of influenced by Zola Project. Maybe I'll even try making some. It would be a good way to brush up on my character design skills. If you want to see a video where I actually redesign some of the Vocaloid 6 voice banks, do let me know down below. So how can Yamaha get back on the right track with their design? Giving their voice banks identities beyond their names would be a great first step, even if it's gradual. I think it'd actually be a really cool and interesting concept if these characters started as silhouettes, Then over time, as producers made music with them, the design was adapted to fit the common motifs in the music being created. For example, one of the voice banks being used to create more J-pop style music would have a more J-pop inspired design, while on the other hand, the voice banks being used for more R&B and hip-hop tracks could have a style inspired by that genre. Not necessarily to put them in a box, but to show how the producers using Vocaloid have chosen to use the vocals and where those Vocaloids shine the most. But at the end of the day, I'm just a guy with a piece of paper saying I'm good at illustration animation, what do I know? But that was my first episode of CTRL+T. Not quite a podcast, not quite a video essay, just pure yapping about a topic I find interesting. Have a suggestion on what I should talk about next time? Consider commenting it down below and I'll sort of consider it for next time. I kind of want to talk about Animal Jam next time. I've been looking at a lot of Animal Jam stuff lately. That's something I found quite interesting. But if you like my art and what I do, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel so I know you guys are liking it. It's a really great way to sort of tell me, hey, I like this, do more of this please. And I think we're actually pretty close to hitting 600 subscribers, which is very exciting. I didn't expect to grow that fast. I also run a shop on Etsy, have a monthly sticker club, and I live stream on Tuesdays and Saturdays. And if any of that sounds remotely interesting to you, all the information is down in the description. But that is all from me this week. Take care and goodbye.